Okay, folks, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about Lesson 12, Configuring Remote Management. My name is Scott Neal. This is the latest installment of covering Windows 8.1, the Microsoft 7687 exam. Today we're going to be covering exam objective 3.4. What's the difference between remote assistance and remote desktop? Big differences between the two. They're both kind of the best friends of the network administrator or IT support person, but they do have some fundamental differences. So I do want to cover that today in our lecture, as well as talk a little bit about MMC and how MMC can also be beneficial to us from an administrator point of view. Later in the lecture, we will talk a little bit more about the particulars of setting up and using remote desktop and assistance. And in addition to that, as we finish out the lecture, we'll talk about using remote management services, in particular WinRS.exe and PowerShell's ICM command. So let's go ahead and get started. Remote desktop and remote assistance are both the best friends for the network administrator. We as network administrators generally don't like to burn calories, and I say that kind of tongue-in-cheek. I say that to my students all the time, that we don't like to burn calories. We really like to be able to play Quake during the work hours, but in reality what it boils down to is productivity. And the less time that I am up moving about from office to office, or having to travel to some other location on the network in order to facilitate repairs or diagnose something, that travel time is non-productive. So if I can access these systems from the comfort of my desktop, then I am maximizing my productivity. Now, with that said, I don't think that remote desktop and remote assistance is the end-all be-all of administration in the IT environment. You'll see a lot of IT environments where they exclusively use remote desktop or remote assistance to connect to their systems. I think there's something lacking there. I think that you are doing yourself a little bit of a disservice if you don't have some face-to-face contact with your users from time to time. I think it's important that users know who you are. It's easy to forget that there's a face attached to the name, particularly with IT support people. And having the availability of being able to go and shake their hand and meet with them face-to-face has some advantages. With that said, an overwhelming majority of the time, if you can perform what you need to perform with remote desktop, remote assistance, generally you're going to be more productive at making that repair or facilitating that upgrade or whatever you're doing. So, back to remote desktop. Remote desktop is a great tool for performing administrative functions on a device, particularly servers, but in the course of this lecture, desktop environments as well. So if I want to log into a system, it's in the middle of the evening, I want to perform an upgrade, or I want to go in and perhaps install some updates on the system, or I want to diagnose something that someone was having a problem with earlier. Remote desktop is a great tool to use. There are some caveats to remote desktop. For one thing, you are not going to be able to interact with the user with remote desktop. By the act of connecting to remote desktop, the local user is locked out of the system and they will be automatically logged off. Likewise, if you come across a device where someone is remoting into the desktop and you see that, you can see that it will say user Scott J. Neal is logged into this system. If you facilitate a login from that laptop or desktop, you're going to be kicking them off the system. So there's no way for any interactivity. By default, Windows does not enable remote assistance remote desktop. So this is something that you either have to set up manually or through group policy, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. Now, remote assistance is kinder, it's gentler, and it does provide that interactivity that we may occasionally want with our users. So, remote assistance, if you need to connect and have a user, say, show you or assist you with diagnosing a problem, or maybe you need to set up a training time or some sort of training session with a user to show them how to use a particular application. You're probably going to want to use remote assistance for that. Get them on the phone, talk to them, and talk them through the process while you can show them on the desktop. Or maybe even have them take over the desktop and show you what the problem is, or show you that they've learned the material. Now, as far as using the console, or MMC as they call it, or PowerShell, these are two totally different animals, and we will talk about those. I particularly want to talk about MMC because MMC is a very powerful tool. The Microsoft Management Console, of course, is the tool of choice for accessing the administrative tools on our local machines. Whenever we go into the control panel and pull up things, we're really kind of pulling up these MMC snap-ins that allow us to do things like disk management, or group policy management, or managing or looking at the event viewers. All of these are done through what we call snap-ins. A snap-in is just a fancy way for utility that we can activate through the MMC console. Now, we can also pull up the MMC console, a blank MMC console, either from the Metro screen simply by typing MMC, or we can do it through the search screen in the desktop just by typing MMC and hitting enter, and you will end up with a blank snap-in tool. Now, these tools by default, when you set them up, are going to be set up to administer your local system. However, I can redirect or reconfigure these MMC snap-ins to work or manage other remote systems. And I can do that one of two ways. I can either redirect an existing snap-in to another system, or I can create a console that's customized to connect to another system when started. Now, why would I want to redirect an existing snap-in to another system? Well, perhaps I am looking at something, or I'll pull up an event viewer for some reason, and I decide I need to connect to a server or to another Windows 8.1 box, and maybe I need to compare the event log for some reason. I can do that simply by going into that snap-in and doing a redirect with a screen that looks very similar to what you see here, and then choose another computer, browse to that computer, or type in the IP address to that computer, or if DNS is working fine, I can go ahead and type the computer name to that computer, and I should be able to connect to that system, provided the credentials are right that I've logged in with. I can then, that snap-in will emulate or show me the data from that system. So if I'm in the event logs, my event logs will then reflect the event logs of that particular system that I've connected to. Now, if I want to use MMC on a more long-term basis, I can do that too. And there's some reasons why MMC is a good tool for something like that. For one thing, remote desktop, remote assistance, these tools are very resource intensive. They use a protocol that we refer to as RDP, or remote desktop protocol, but this protocol is resource intensive. We're, after all, taking the GUI from a remote system and we're kind of superimposing it on a GUI that's running already on a local machine. And you do that once or twice or three times simultaneously and have these things running concurrently on the system, you're eating up a lot of resources. But there are times when maybe you want to be looking or monitoring three different systems concurrently on the system. Perhaps you're managing 3 servers, or perhaps you are trying to analyze 3 separate 8.1 Windows systems, and you're using the MMC snap-in to do that. I can add multiple copies of the same snap-in to monitor those multiple systems simultaneously. And because I'm using the MMC snap-in, my resource overhead on my local machine, and indeed on those machines as well, will be minimal. Now, another key feature about these snap-ins, these MMC snap-ins, is that most of these snap-ins are configurable in some way. That means that if I open up, say, the event viewer snap-in, I can take that snap-in and I can configure it to show me certain events, or I can display it a certain way, and kind of maximize my productivity for that particular snap-in. That through the Windows desktop interface is a little more clunky. So, and the nice thing about it is I can take that MMC snap-in, I can save those credentials, save that setup, and when I come in the next day, I can cut on the system, start that MMC snap-in, and those will come right back up and be just the way I left them the next day, and I won't have to reconfigure them again. If I shut off my system with remote desktop, I'm going to have to go back the next morning. I'm going to have to reconnect to the remotely to those servers or to those systems and bring up MMC again. And of course, I see it on the desktop, which means no one else can do any work. And with running MMC, people can be working on that system, and I can still be seeing that data traverse over the network. Okay, so remote desktop connection. As I said before, remote desktop connection is an administrator's best friend, and it is completely unlike the MMC snap-in redirects that we were just talking about. For one thing, remote desktop connection, by default, all these remote assistance, remote desktop connections must be turned on. They are by default turned off, and you can actually go into the Metro screen and type remote desktop connection, and it will propagate the screen with all the options available for remote assistance, remote desktop, and for enabling those services. I chose, as you can see in this illustration here, I chose to go in through the control panel and click on allow remote assistance and bring up the system properties for that the long way, because in Windows typically there's more than one way to do any particular thing. I usually say there's 3 ways to do anything in Windows, and this is there's no exception for enabling and activating and using remote desktop and remote assistance as well. But anyways, in this particular screen that you see here on the slide, I am allowing the remote connections to the computer. I have enabled allow remote assistance connections to the computer. I simply apply those settings, and then they're set until I change them again. The other way that I could do that, of course, is through group policy, and we'll talk about that momentarily. Remote desktop connection, as I pointed out before, is the non-user interactive version of remote assistance. It is really a good administrative tool that allows us to connect remotely to other systems and uses the RDP protocol. Once I have enabled that remote desktop connectivity on the target computer, I can then search for the remote desktop connection client and connect directly to that targeted system that I've enabled. So what you see here on this screen is the remote desktop connection where I'm connecting to a computer that I've aptly named System 6. I do have to provide my credentials for that system just as if I were sitting in front of it. So it's important to note that remote desktop is just as it sounds. It is like I am sitting at the desktop of that system and performing and modifying the physical desktop itself. It is a very GUI based driven protocol that allows me to see what is going to be seen on that system, or what is being seen on that system in real time. So logging in and logging out is just like you would normally do if you were doing remote desktop or sitting on the local machine. Now, if I just happen to close the remote desktop connection, you're going to get a warning box. That warning box is going to say something along the lines of, you are disconnecting this service, however you are still logged into the machine. There are some things that you need to be aware of for that. For one thing, if you're going to remote desktop into other users' systems, this is generally not advised. Why? Because when the user comes in the next day, he's going to see this little note that says that somebody's logged into the system. If it's an administrator and you have changed your credentials significantly from what they're used to, they may have trouble logging back into the system. And indeed, anything that you may have not saved, or any configuration settings you may have changed and not made any saves to, will be lost when they log into that system. Alright, so remote assistance is a different animal from remote desktop in the sense that remote assistance will allow administrators to work with their users on a one-to-one basis from the comfort of their desk, or if you have the protocols turned on over the gateway to your network, you can actually use remote assistance from your house. It does take a little configuring to do it, and do it securely, and we'll talk about some of the security risks momentarily. But unlike remote desktop, the user can interact with the person offering assistance, and that's very important. That means that remote assistance is going to be my tool of choice if I want to perform training for that user, if I want to watch the user, maybe there's a intermittent problem and I want to see what that user is doing that creates that problem, so I can use it for diagnoses. Maybe I want to go in and make some configuration changes, and I want the user to feel like part of the equation. It's nice to include your users in things like that. It makes them feel empowered because they actually get to relinquish control of the desktop to you, and then they can take it back at any moment. So remote assistance is also it's a very politically correct tool to use in many corporate and enterprise environments, because people are going to be working on stuff. Some of that stuff is sensitive in nature, perhaps, or maybe it's just stuff you don't want to see. And so by offering remote assistance to the users, what you're basically saying is, can I access your system, and by the way, can you get all the stuff on there that I don't need to see turned off so that I can get in and work on the system? This is a lot more friendly than just saying remote desktop, I'm going to remote into the system, I'm going to log off the user, I'm going all of their work that they're not saved or have not saved will be completely lost immediately. And so we don't like to do that. It's very cumbersome for the user to do that. It sets up ill will. So remote assistance is really the friendlier, more PC way of connecting to users' systems, particularly when we know that there's somebody there. Another thing that I wanted to point out is that remote assistance, remote desktop has to be manually configured on these machines, except if I am in an enterprise environment and I want to, say, go into my default group policy for my domain. I can actually go into that domain group policy and actually enable these services for all of my users in the domain, or for a particular OU in the domain. In this screen here, I'm actually going in and configuring the remote desktop, remote assistance. I'm actually setting up something that's called unsolicited remote assistance. Unsolicited remote assistance takes the pain away from the user of having to send an invite or having to create a invite file to upload somewhere to facilitate the remote assistance connection. So by using unsolicited remote assistance, I have the power as a network administrator to facilitate that connection on my end. It makes the whole remote assistance thing very seamless, very slick, very chic. So if you really want to look like a hero, if you really want to look like you know what you're doing and you're on the domain, go ahead and enable this unsolicited remote assistance for your users, and you'll be surprised how impressive that is for them to be able to watch you work, and they don't have to do anything except sit back and watch you work. You can do this. You can also set up a local group policy for your machines if you're going to image those machines or whatever. But this is, if you have a domain set up, this is a very easy way to ensure that all of the machines on your network are running the domain policy equivalent of remote connectivity or remote assistance. Alright, so unless it's configured through group policy and you're using the unsolicited remote assistance, then the user is going to have to send an invitation. This is particularly true in instances where maybe you're acting as a consultant and you have intermittent contact with users, or they are not in a domain environment or enterprise environment. Then they're either going to have to do one of two things. They're either going to have to send you an email with a link that will allow you connectivity into their environment, or they're going to have to save the invite as a file. And then that file is going to have to be uploaded to a server or emailed to you, or some other way you'll have to get that file. Now, the file's expiration date, that's the length of time that you will have to be able to connect to that user's system, by default is set for 2 hours. And I wanted to tell you this because, well, first of all, I don't remember the book talking about it, but second of all, if you are doing some sort of consulting work, if you are going to be working on someone's system and you feel like you're going to have to go back and do some configuration changes for that user, or you're going to have to interact with that user to finalize the project, you may work with that user to go ahead and create an invitation file, an assistance file that you can store, take with you, and these files are configurable. So you don't have to have a file for 2 hours. You can set it for 1 day or 2 days or 10 days, all the way up to 99 days, which is the maximum lifespan of a remote assistance file, 99 days. So that's nice because you can actually store these files, take them with you in a flash drive or something, and if somebody needs to have you connect to their system, you have got an easy way to do that. It relieves the burden of them having to recreate additional invitation or invites and emailing them to you and making sure email works and all that, at least for 99 days. And then you have to figure out another way to do it, or go back and get another file from them. So this is the Windows Remote Assistance. This is the invite helper. You go in here, in this particular instance we're saving the invitation as a file. You can save the invitation as an attachment and then as a file essentially, and then you upload that to an email and you can email it out. Or you can use email to send an invitation. If you do that, if you use a compatible email program, this will start the email program and attach an invitation file. Or use Easy Connect, and that option, if Easy Connect is also available to the other person. So there are several ways that we can, through remote assistance, connect to our users' systems. By far, using the remote assistance unsolicited assistance option in your domain policy in an enterprise environment is the way. Okay, before we move on with remote management services, I do want to talk a little bit about some security issues associated with remote assistance, remote desktop. So anytime, of course, that you punch a hole through the firewall, you are creating an instance where someone can get through. So this is no different from a firewall that separates two shops in a downtown district. The longer the firewall's there, and the more people that rent the shops and they decide they want to punch holes through this firewall, eventually they'll punch enough holes in it that some fire will get through. So using remote assistance, remote desktop does enable port 3389 on your firewall, and that's fine. The point being is that if you're not going to be using remote assistance or remote desktop on the system, you really don't want to enable these services. These are services that people who are out probing networks, this is a particular port that one of the many ports that they will try to connect to see if there is some service running on the ports. If someone does connect, if someone does have gets unauthorized access using remote assistance, they can severely hose your system. They are connecting most of the time. They're going to be connecting with some sort of administrative privileges on the box, so you can end up with a huge mess. Therefore, it is important to note, particularly if you are the recipient of help, that you don't want to ever grant access to someone you don't know to remote desktop or remote assistance features for your network or for your local system. One of the big scams that that has been going around for a long time involves people connecting to your systems pretending to be Microsoft or pretending to be whoever, and they're trying to fix your system. What they are in reality doing is they are probing your system, pretending that there's something wrong with your system, making you pay some sort of exorbitant fee to fix a problem which doesn't exist, and at the same time they're probably looking through your system to see what kind of sensitive information they can glean off of it. So just bear in mind that if you're using remote assistance, part of the key features of remote assistance is the ability to take back control of the system at any point that you feel compromised while you're interacting with that administrator. So that's a nice way to ensure that that user, that the administrator is not going to do but so much damage to your system. I remember a particular student that was telling me about an experience that she had when she had contacted some guy who was supposed to be, there are all these people on the web that say they'll fix your systems, and she had contacted this guy, and he had used remote assistance to get into the system. She had sent an invite, he took the invite and was working on the system. And at some point this student realized that he was copying down some of the Cisco tools that we give our students to help study for the exams. And when she asked him what he was doing, he said, well, I got a Cisco exam coming up, and I noticed you had these tools on your desktop, and I was copying them down. Needless to say, I hope I do not ever have to tell anyone watching this lecture that that is totally an inappropriate use of using remote assistance or remote desktop. You are, as an administrator, one of the biggest assets that you can have is your trust relationship with your users. And when that relationship is violated in any way, then your longevity with that organization is soon to be parted. It is important for people in our business to maintain a trustworthy environment in our IT staff, and that means not probing around in places where we don't need to probe or we're not supposed to be probing. It means giving the user some privacy, particularly our clients. That there's a certain level of privacy associated with it. I mean, we as network administrators are going to come across things either on our users' personal laptops or desktops that are at the very least embarrassing to the user. And so it is up to us to draw a line between this is something that is none of my business, it's something that I'm going to choose to ignore, and as long as it's not something that's illegal, you have a moral dilemma there you're going to have to overcome and decide what you're going to do about. But most of these things that you run across are at most embarrassing to them. And using remote assistance or remote desktop to gain access to this material, to copy down material that's advantageous to you without permission, is not appropriate. So it's the key thing with any kind of remote management tools is that you are empowered to use these tools for what they're intended for, which is to maintain the network, maintain the operating systems and their functionality, and to assist your users when called upon. Alright, so key thing being security, remote management. Another thing I want to point out with security is, and I've mentioned this earlier before, the concept of being able to use remote assistance or remote desktop over the firewall from outside the network. Generally speaking, if you're going to use this kind of, or allow this kind of connectivity either for you or your users, in some of the institutions I've been in allow this for their users, and that's fine. It helps maximize their productivity because they can connect to their desktops and do work from their desktops. But I would insist that if you're going to do that you need to set up a VPN server and insist that they connect, set it up so that they have to connect through the VPN server to allow them remote assistance or to allow them remote desktop access, or to allow you remote desktop access. This gives you a certain extra level of security over the internet, and by all means, if this is not something that you plan to routinely use, don't enable it. And if you decide to not use it or use it sporadically, go ahead and disable it on the firewall to your gateway. With that said, now we can talk about Windows Remote Management. Now, Windows 8.1, and really 8 also, provides a service that enables administrators to execute commands on the remote systems using Windows PowerShell or the Windows Remote Shell, which is winrs.exe. It's a command line program. But first, you're going to have to configure this service manually or through the group policy settings to enable it. And how would you do this? Well, if we go back to the screen here, that this is actually going in and starting the RM service. And as you can see, what I've done on the command prompt on this system is I've gone in and started by typing winrm quick config up here, win quick config, and it will say that winrm is not set up to receive the request on this machine. So I have to make some changes. I have to start that winrm service, and then I have to set the winrm service type to delayed auto start. Now it's going to ask you, do you want to make these changes, yes or no? And you would say yes. Now once you do that, it will take a minute, and then it will say winrm has updated to receive those requests, and then winrm service type is changed successfully. It will restart the server, it will start the service, and then you can once the service is started, I can create a winrm listener to accept the WSMan requests to any IP on the machine. Say yes to that, and then now once you've done that, the winrm service will be ready for remote management. Now once the remote management is set up, you can then execute commands on other computers that have been similarly configured. To execute the command on the Windows 8.1 prompt, you're going to have to use what's called the winrs.exe program. And what you see here, I really don't. Today's probably not the good day to go through and try to show you some specific WinRS commands, but I do want to show you the format. And what you see here at the bottom of the screen is the format for using WinRS. So when you're in the command line, just type WinRS. -R is the option for computer, and then you put the computer name. -U is for the user. That would be the user that you're going to connect to that system with. -P is the password for that user, and then whatever command that you want to run on that machine from the remote command line. So if I want to shut down that machine, I can do that simply by going through and doing the WinRS system, and then I can perform a shutdown on that service. Alright, so last but not least, I do want to mention PowerShell. PowerShell version 3, which started coming out with Windows 8, does allow you to remotely execute commands. The PowerShell command, in order to execute these commands, I would use a command that's called ICM. What you see here is the kind of the syntax for ICM. You have the ICM command, the name of the computer, and of course the command prompt that the command that you want to run on that computer. Now you do have to open an elevated PowerShell session to make this happen. So just kind of a side note that you can use the PowerShell. PowerShell has become extremely useful. In Windows Server 2012, I think they introduced 2,500 new commandlets so that you could do everything through PowerShell without having to even use a GUI. So you're seeing the PowerShell become more and more prevalent in the Windows environment. I always joke that Windows is not Windows anymore. It's kind of become Linux, because now we are seeing us move further and further away from these GUI environments, because these GUI environments do offer a larger security footprint. They do use more resources. I don't think, obviously, when it comes to client systems, this is something that's going to be an issue. But certainly in the server systems, you're beginning to see us move more and more away from the GUI interface, or at least making the GUI interface, in the case of Server 2012, you can add it, you can take it off, and you can do it all without having to restart a system. It's really slick. But this is not a Windows Server class. This is a Windows 8 class. So, so just bear in mind that Windows PowerShell is a very powerful tool that will allow you to do everything, just about everything that you want to do on your system without having to invoke some sort of GUI to make it happen. Alright, So let's just go ahead and summarize. Like I said, this was a quick lecture for the day. Remote assistance and remote desktop use the RDP protocol to connect through port 3389 to remote systems for administrative training or monitoring purposes. Bear in mind that there are some significant differences between remote desktop and remote assistance. Remote desktop is kind of an administrative tool used by IT support personnel to effect changes on systems, to perform upgrades, to perform application installs, things of that nature. While remote assistance is a tool that we can use to interact with our users, to train with them, to facilitate diagnoses of problems on systems and things of that nature. Also bear in mind that these services are not configured by default, and they must be configured manually through either group policy or through the group policy domain controller, like I showed you earlier, or by, in the case of remote assistance, going in and setting those settings and then having to send invites out, a manual invite out to the users that you want to connect to those systems to help you with whatever you need help with. Alright, so the MMC console, on the other hand, is a totally different animal. This is not as GUI interactive as your remote desktop service. It does use the GUI snap-in console, which is normally used for local administrative functions. It can perform all the same functions that you can do on a local machine or remotely accessed machines, provided you have the credentials needed on those remote systems. And then you can go in and type MMC, pull up a console, and create either a console that's static, that will start up every time you want to start it up. It will start up pointing to a certain box, or you can do it as a one-time basis by doing simply a redirect to an existing console. And of course, remote commands. All these remote commands that we've talked about through remote assistance, remote desktop, all these things we can do on these systems, we can affect those commands on these systems simply by using PowerShell or the remote management service. Alright, a short and sweet lecture dealing with remote management. I would encourage you to play with remote management. You can set up two VMs. Turn on the remote management between the two, make sure that you can talk to each of the two machines, and you can literally sit and watch as you offer remote assistance to one machine, accept it, and then watch you connect to that machine. I would spend a little time perfecting that technique and figuring out what it is you're doing. When you talk about remote management and remote desktop and remote assistance, or if you take a NOS 230 or take a server class of me, or look at my online server lectures, one of the things that we will talk more in depth of, you'll be doing a lot more of, is remote desktop in particular, because we do use remote desktop as administrators every day. When it comes to administering servers, when it comes to administering desktops, say late in the evening when nobody's there and we need to perform some repairs, you can't beat remote desktop. It beats a key to an office any day. Alright, well, I hope you have a good night. We will talk about lesson 13 next. Yes, lesson 13, which I believe talks about shared resources. And I hope you have a great day tomorrow. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.